Okay, well, welcome to Chapter 13. We're going to cover the next section of GUI, kind of going to the advanced GUI. And so the first thing it talks about is the swing and AWT class hierarchy. So basically we've kind of touched on the surface of the AWT stuff. Now what we need to do is kind of dive a little deeper in. So we're going to cover things like read-only text boxes and lists, combo boxes, and how to display images inside of labels and buttons and that type of thing. So right off the bat, and here they talk about this on Figure 13.1, talks about the hierarchy of how things are basically related to each other, how they inherit things. Again, everything always comes from the object, and from the object we have the component. Inside the container inherits from the component, the window inherits from the container, and the frame inherits from the window, and that's part of the AWT package. Then we take it a step further into the J-frame and all those, basically, which is the Java X swing components. We got the J-frame, which inherits from the frame. The J component comes from the container, and then all of these new things we've talked about: the J labels, the J buttons, the J text fields, so on and so forth. So we're basically going to go into more detail on some of those new items. So the very first one that we talk about, we've already talked about a text box. So a text box is just that. It displays field and text. We're actually able to go into that text field and type things in. But what if we wanted to use that as a place to display data as opposed to letting folks enter it? Well, we can actually make it so that it's not editable, which means that text box is read-only. And the way we would do it is every JText field has a method called setEditable, and that setEditable is a method. When it defaults to true, but we can set it to false. And when we do set it to false, it is no longer editable. So we'll see how that works here in just a second. So the very first GUI complex thing we're going to talk about is this thing called a list. And a list is just that. Think of a list as kind of a box that has a list of items in there. The thing we can do, though, we can select one of those items. And then what we do with that, well, how do you want to use that list? Well, we'll see how we can basically utilize it. Excuse me. So if we go into our list window, we can see that we create a list window which extends a J-frame, and which means this guy is a J-frame. We do have some instance variables. We have two J panels, a J list, and a J text field, and a J label. We then create an array. We'll see how we use that array here in a second. It's a string array. It's called months, and we load it with all the months of the year. Then I have my constructor. So the constructor, so when this is instantiated, this constructor is going to execute. We set the title, we set what to do when we click on the X. We then call this method called build month panel. We build the selected month panel, and then we basically add the month panel to the border layout. We add the selected month panel to the border layout. We use pack. Pack says make sure everything fits inside of this J frame and this panel. Make sure it fits. We may have to make something bigger or smaller, but the pack basically makes sure it fits. And then we go ahead and set visible equals true of the J-frame. So let's take a look at this build month panel first. So here's our build month panel method. We go ahead and instantiate the month panel as a new J panel. We go ahead and instantiate the month list as a new J list, and notice we take that array month and load it in there as part of the constructor. So passing in an array into the constructor, it basically loads that list box. We'll see here in just a second. So that right there just loaded that list box with all 12 month names. Then I say month list, which is my list box, dot set selected mode, selection mode. Meaning, how are you going to allow someone to select an item? Do you want them to select one item or multiple items? Well, we're going to use a class called a list selected model. Now notice this we're not instantiating this class, we're not creating an object from this class, we're just saying I just want to use this class. And this and if you notice up here, I've imported the Java X-Swing, event. Well, if as I told in the past, or we've seen in previous chapters, if I do a Java X.Swing asterisk, that should grab everything. Well, it kind of sort of does. But in this case, I want to be very specific, and this class called list selected model is part of the event. If I don't do this import Java X-Swing event, I'm going to have to cast this particular guy in order to use it. So to save me from casting, I'm going to just basically just say list selected model dot selected single selection. And if we basically click right here on that period, behind the period, and do a control space, it brings up multiple, single interval, and single. And we'll talk about all those three more and more detail in a few minutes. So I've told it, how am I going to allow the user to select something? I said single, means one at a time. I take that list box, add selected list listener. So now I've got a listener. So that listener says, when you click on this, I'm going to do something. So here is my listener, my list listener. When the value changes, which is the only method that's in there, we're going to grab whatever has been selected as the E, and we're going to say the string selection is equal to, now this parentheses, string parentheses, that's called casting, if you remember. It says everything to the right of this will be converted to a string. So month.list get selected value. So whatever we selected in that list will be converted to a string and thrown into the variable selection. Then I say selected month.set text. So what is selected month? If we go all the way to the top up here, selected month is a JText field. So we have a text box at the bottom of this form. We're saying whatever we selected up here, the listener says when you click on something, I know to go ahead and throw it into that text box down below. Okay, so that's basically what that did right there. Selected month, which is a text box, dot set text selection. Okay. Then build selected month panel. So here's our build selected month panel. So our selected month panel is a new J panel. Our label said you selected, so now we're going to have a label inside this panel. And then I've got selected month equals new select text. So we're instantiating the text box as a size 10. And now look at this. I'm saying the selected month, which is a text box, dot set editable equals false. So what I'm saying is I want to use this text box to display some text. I don't want you to edit it. Why? Because I'm using a list box to load it. I don't want you to edit it. I want you to select something from the list box to put something in there. Then I say select month panel dot add label. So I add the label to this panel. I add the selected month, whatever we basically this text box, I've added that to the panel. So I've got two panels. I've got the list box panel and the text box panel. Then up here I go ahead and add those two panels to my J-frame. I go ahead and pack it down so it basically everything fits nice on the screen. If it's too big, it will shrink it down. And then I set visible equals true. So the J-frame is now visible. We're displaying it to the user. So I run it. Oh, by the way, there is a public static void main down at the bottom, which basically makes this thing cute. So it actually instantiates this class, which the constructor kicks off. So here's a list box. This is one panel. Here's the use selected, and here's the text box down below. Notice I can't click in it because set editable is equal to false. When I click on January, the listener just ran and loaded the text box. Boom, we see that. I click May, same thing. So every time I click it, that listener is running. Because again, that listener is sitting there listening going, okay, you just click something, boom, and it ran. Okay. So that's just a simple list box. Okay, so I'm back. So here is, we talked about the single selection and the multiple. Well, If I do a single, that's all it's going to let me do is right here, select one at a time. As soon as I select one, if I select another, the other one basically it's like a radio button, gets deselected. The single interval says you can select multiple, but they must be in a row. So what happens there is like say right here, I can select Jerry, Greg, Jack, and Kirk since they're all in a row. I hold down the control key, I click one. As soon as I click on something else with my control key down, it deselects the rest. So I can select multiple as long as they're together. Then multiple says just that. I can click multiple items and they don't have to be in a row. Okay, so now, let's say I don't want my list box to be that tall. I want it to be shorter. Now to do that, I need to have a scroll bar to the right hand side. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have to add a scroll panel and then take our list and throw it into that scroll panel. So if we take a look at the next item, which is a list window with a scroll. So here I've got my two J panels, so my list box and then basically how I want to display it down below. I've got my list, month list. Now I've got a new thing. This is a J scroll pane. A J scroll pane, and we've got our text field, we've got our J label. So we've got everything the same except we've added a J scroll pane. Here's my array. Here's my constructor. Same thing, set the title, set what to do when you click on the X, set our layout. We build our month panel. We build our selected month panel. We add it to our J frame. We add the other panel to our J frame, and then I pack it and I set visible. So here's my build panel. I instantiate my month panel. I instantiate my month list. Again, I'm throwing my array in there. That constructor goes ahead and loads the array into the list. Then I say month list dot add list selection listener. So I've got a listener now, so when I click on something, the listener is going to execute. I say month list dot set visible row count equals 6. Now there's something new. What I'm telling is I want that list box to only display 6 lines. That's it. Then I instantiate my scroll pane as a new J scroll pane month list. So take that list that's only displaying 6 items and throw it into that scroll pane. So now I've got a scroll bar attached to my list because it's part of that pane. I come back and I build my selected month panel. So here's my selected month panel. I go ahead and instantiate my selected month panel. I create a label. My selected month is a J text box. This is no different than the other one. Okay, I believe this is exactly identical. Add the label and we add the selected month. So again, we got a panel down below where we add the label, we add the text box, we're good to go. Here's my listener. My listener says we're going to create a string variable called selection. And it's equal to, now if you remember from a previous chapter, this left parenthesis string right parenthesis is called casting. It says everything to the right of this is a string. So month list dot get selected value. So I go to the month list, I grab whatever we selected, I convert it to a string, and I throw it into selection. Then I say selected month dot set text. Whatever we selected that's been converted to a string is now in that J text box. Here's my public static void main. I go ahead and instantiate this, which causes that constructor to execute. Okay. So when I run it, it's pretty much the same thing as last time, except we have a list box that's only 6 lines. It's thrown into a scroll panel, which automatically adds a scroll bar to the side of a list box if it needs more room. There I can scroll back and forth. Again, I select it. Again, the listener adds it to the text box. So the only difference there is I've made the scroll box only 6. I've added a scroll. The list box is 6, and I've put it into a scroll pane, which automatically adds the scroll bar to the right. Okay, so continuing on. We can add items to an existing list, and the way we do that is we take that list, that JList, and use set list data, and we can add whatever that array is. Again, we have to add array data to lists. So let's talk about multiple selections, and we'll talk about how we can use our set. So here's the multiple interval selection. So I come over here, and here is the multiple interval. Now, again, it extends a J-frame, so it has everything a J-frame has. We've got 1, 2, 3 panels, 2 lists, 2 scroll panes, and a button. Okay, so those are instance variables. I then create my array. Here's my constructor. When I instantiate this, this automatically gets executed. Set the title. What to do when we click on the X. Set the layout as a border layout. I build the month panel, I build the selected month panel, and I build the button panel. So I have 3 panels. I then go ahead and add the month panel to the north, the month panel, selected month panel to the center, and the button panel to the south. I pack it, which again makes sure everything fits inside of this J-frame and the panels and all that stuff. It shrinks things to make them fit. Set visible equals true. So here's my build month panel. We've already seen this before. Month panel, instantiated as a new month panel. Month list is a new list. We go ahead and grab this array months and throw it in there. So now our list has a list of data. Month list.set selected model. Again, we've seen this before as well. I got this class called list selection model, multiple interval selection. I'm telling it, I'm going to allow you to select multiple items. I set the month list set visible row count equal to 6. I've only got 6 rows. I go ahead and add that. I add it to a scroll pane, so now it's going to have a scroll bar if it needs it. Then month panel.add scroll pane, I go ahead and add it to the month panel. Now my month panel has all the data in there. Then I build my selected month panel. There instantiate my J panel. I instantiate my month list. Okay. Now here's what we're doing differently. In the previous one, we displayed them in a text box down below. This one, since we're going to select multiple items, I want to display multiple items. And the way I do that is I have to display them in a list down below. So here I've got my selected month list is a new J list. So that's the list. It's not a text box. The selected month list.set visible row count equals 6. So it has only 6 visible as well. If I select more than 6, it's going to have a scroll pane right here. Scroll pane 2 equals new scroll pane selected month list. So again, I've got a scroll pane with a J list inside of it. Selected month panel, add scroll. So I've actually added that to the panel now. Here's my button panel. There's a new J panel. Here's my new J button. It's got a label, get selections, button, add action listener. So this is the guy that's going to do all the work. When I click this button, this is what's going to execute. I add that button to the button panel. So here's my listener. Object, left and right square bracket. That means it's an array. Selections. So the selections is an array. What does it contain? Month list dot get selected values. It says if you've selected multiple items, I'm going to grab those and throw them into an array. Now, before we continue, let's talk about why this line is crossed out. This line is crossed out because it says this is depreciated. What does that mean? That means in the current Java version, this method will work. It is being planned to be removed in future versions. So what they're saying is, we compile this code. The compiled code will run between now and whenever. But when we go to edit this guy, that could have a red squiggly line in future values or for future versions, which means it's broken. So we need to, in the future, realize that if we need to make a change to that, or we need to make sure we go in and find out what is going to replace that. Okay, there will be some way to replace that. We can research it on the internet or whatever the case may be, but that is going away is what that's saying. So anyway, so now I've got my selections, which is an array, what I've selected in my list. I say selected month list dot set list data selection. So now the box in the bottom is going to grab what we selected in the top and display it in that bottom list box. Okay, and there's our public static void main. So it's very simple. Click on it. Got instantiated, displayed those three panels. Here's my list box with a scroll bar. Here's a list box. It's got a scroll bar as well, but guess what? If it doesn't have enough data to basically go past that, it will not display a scroll bar. And there's my button panel. So I can click on January, hold down my control key, click March, May, June, scroll down and click July, August, September. When I click Get Selections, notice what it did. It threw those values down below, added a scroll bar because we basically went beyond 6, and voila, we now have a list of items that we selected. Okay. So now let's talk about combo boxes. Now combo boxes are pretty much identical to list boxes. They have all pretty much the same methods and everything. The only difference is a combo box is a drop-down box. It basically has a drop-down list box is basically all it's doing. So the way it displays the list is a little different. So if we look at the combo box demo, or combo box window, sorry. Combo box window, there you see we have a J panel and a J panel. So again, combo box extends J frame. It's got two J panels, it's got a combo box, it's got a J label and a J text field. So this is identical to the second one we talked about, where we selected a item in our list box and it displayed it in a text box down below. This is going to do the same exact thing, except instead of a list box, it's going to have a combo box. We're not using months, we're using coffee, so I've created an array, a string array called coffee, and I've loaded it with regular coffee, dark roast, cappuccino, espresso, and decaf. Here's my constructor. When it's instantiated, it's going to set the title, what to do when we click on the X. We set our layout to border layout. We build our coffee panel. We build our selected coffee panel. We add the coffee panel and the selected coffee panel to our J-frame. We pack it, make sure everything fits, and then we set visible equals true. So let's take a look at the coffee panel. There we instantiate our J panel. There we instantiate our combo box. We load it with the coffee. Remember with the list box, pretty much identical. We set the coffee box, set editable equals true. Okay. We set the coffee box dot set action listener. So again, when we click on something inside that list box, that combo drop down box, it's going to go ahead and execute this action listener. We go ahead and add the coffee panel. We add the coffee combo box to the coffee panel. Then our coffee build selected coffee panel, so the bottom half of the screen, we go ahead and instantiate a new J panel. We create a label called You Selected. We now have selected coffee.j text field, so we created a text box that's 10 bytes wide. We go ahead and set the editable equals false. I don't want you to edit it because I'm going to load this with the data you selected from the combo box. Then I say selected coffee panel, add the label to it, add the selected coffee, which is our our text box, to the panel. So now I have my two panels. And then up here again, I add those two panels to the J-frame, I pack it, set visible equals true. Run it. So there's my regular coffee. Click on the drop down. I click dark roast. The action listener took that, displayed it in the text box. Cappuccino, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, I don't think the one thing you can't do, I don't believe, I don't know if you can set it to multiple selections. I don't believe you can. But anyways, Now, the one thing we can do with a combo box is we can make the combo box editable, meaning I can make it so that I can add my own items. So if I run this again, I believe we made it editable equals true. I run it, I click on the drop down, I can actually come up here and change that to I like Casey's coffee. Notice how it got put into the selected you selected. Okay, and the only reason I'm able to do that is because of this right here. When I create the coffee panel, I've got selected coffee.set editable equals false. I'm sorry, that's text box. Where did I do that at? Right here. Coffee box set editable equals true. If I were to comment that out, that is basically set to false as a default. So if I run this again, and notice I cannot click inside of that box. If I do, it becomes unselectable. Okay, so I have to say editable equals true in order for I can type in my own item I want to add to the list. Okay, so last thing we're going to cover is how to display images inside of a list box and inside of a button. So we are going to take a look at the My Cat image. So My Cat image extends JFrame. It's a JFrame. We add two panels, a label and a button. We go ahead and here is my constructor. So when it's instantiated, this will be executed. I set the title My Cat, what to do when we click on the X. We go ahead and set the border style, the layout to the border layout. We go ahead and build the image panel. We build the button panel. We add those two panels to the J-frame. We pack the J-frames to make sure everything fits, and then we set visible equals true. Now, so here's my build image panel. So I instantiate my panel. I instantiate my label. So click the button to see an image of my cat. So image panel.add image label. So it adds the label to the panel. Then here's my build button panel. Look at this. I've got this new class called an image icon. I'm going to call it smiley image. Now, it's just been created. It's not instantiated. So we can't use it yet. I instantiate my button panel as a new J panel. Smiley image equals new image icon smiley.gif. Now, I could type a path in here. I could type a path, but if I don't, it's going to expect that image to be in the same exact place as my code, as my SRC folder, my source folder. So it's expecting it to be in the same place as this guy. So if I do a right click over here on SRC and click on properties, we can see it's in the C users, data, OneDrive, midstate, blah, 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 chapter 13 source. So if it'll be in the same folder as source, so it'll be right there. So I can do a right click and click copy, come over here and do a paste, and when I do, notice there is smiley.gif. So it's in the same exact place as my source folder. So now when I run this, okay, before we run it, so we add that image. So how do we do that? Well, it says smiley image equals, so we instantiate it. So now we've got an image called smiley image. What type of data is it? What is it? It's an image icon. I say button, so I instantiate my button as a new J button, and I say get image. I set the icon. So a button has a set icon method. So if you have an icon, which is an image icon, if you have that, you can go ahead and throw it into the set icon method, and it will add that to the button. I've got an action listener. So when you click this button, it's going to execute the action listener. We add the button panel. We add the button to the button panel. Boom. So now we got a button panel. As you saw up earlier, we add that button panel to the J-frame. Then down here I set visible equals true. Boom, now that button panel displays and I can click on that button. Button's going to have an image on it now. So we go down here to button listener. Here we've got an image icon, cat image. So now we're creating a second image icon. We're calling it cat image. We're going to instantiate it as a new image icon with cat.jpg. Where should that guy be? Should be in the same place as the SRC folder. Again, if I come over here, do a paste, go to it, there is cat.jpg in the same place as my SRC folder. So, image label, set icon, cat image. So now I'm taking my image label, which is a JLabel, and it's got a method. So the JLabel has a method called set icon, set icon. We set it to the cat image. So now, when we click on the button, it goes ahead and builds this image label, puts the image icon into it. It basically says the image label.set text null, so we don't want any text to be displayed, and we pack it. Then when we add, or it adds it to the image label, and the image label. Okay, so then we take that image label and where's the image? Oh, here it is. Image label. And it basically throws it onto that screen. So, simply run it. Wrong one. So I run it. Notice there's my smiley gift image on my button. So we can add a button to the image, to the button. I click on it, and there's my cat image, which is a JLabel. The cat image is in a JLabel, and there we have it. Okay, so we're going to basically call that quits for this week. We're going to finish chapter 13 next week. We're going to get into some more in-depth things and the GUI, so we'll see you then.